That's gotta be the best Spider-Man incarnation we have seen on the big screen in a long time. Hello my brothers and sisters, my name is Daidarius and welcome to the review of Spiderman Homecoming. So Spider-Man Homecoming actually flows quite well into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It starts out in the aftermath of Avengers Battle for New York when you see all these Chitauri corpses of, I guess they were robot or something, but a lot of shit is just laying all around, and there's these contractors who have got permission to excavate these technologies and they can make a big buck out of it. And we then see that Tony Stark and Stark Industries kind of swoops in and gets all the technologies and the profits from it, and this creates or births the villains for this movies, which I thought was kind of interesting because that means the villains are not bad guys because of Spider-Man. They have another agenda. Spider-Man just happens to try to intervene and foil their plans, which is kind of a new take, if I must say so. We then cut to 8 years later, and that made me wondering how much later of Thor and Iron Man 2 was the Avengers set. It's never stated, but I thought that the movie was taking place in 2012 where it was aired, but clearly not, because I don't think that Spider-Man Homecoming is set in 2020. So there's a bit confusion there, but yeah, who gives a shit. We then cut to Spider-Man or Peter Parker getting ready to fight the rogue Avengers in Civil War. We actually see it's actually funny. The movie starts off with a movie by Peter Parker, and then he just documented and maybe Vine a lot of scenes. You have even seen some of the trailers where he is in this hotel room and he tells all about the shit that went down and how exciting it was. And it's about, I believe, 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes, and it's just to set up the movie, to give you what mindset does Peter Parker and Spider-Man has, where in his career as a superhero is he, and what is it that he wants to achieve during this movie. Because that's what really defines a good movie, is you set up some character motivation and you set up who they are at the beginning of the movie, and hopefully at the end they have learned something and maybe changed for the better. And this movie does that quite well. So we see that Spider-Man, he is in high school, he's a senior preschool. I don't know what it's called. I mean, here where I come from is just the second year of the gymnasium, so second year? But he's in here, and you see him in the chemistry making the spider web under his desk. So you actually get a view behind the scenes of where does his web come from. In the Andrew Garfield movies, it was technology he stole from Oscorp, and then he made the shooters to shoot the web in a certain direction. Whereas here, it's actually Peter who comes up with the formula and creates the web. We don't see him come up with it, we just see him that he makes a lot of these web juices to use later on when he needs them. But you see his day-to-day life, and then you see the Spider-Man aspect of it, where it's clear that he wants something big to happen, because he has now tasted what being a real superhero means. He fought these big superheroes in Civil War, and he has gotten a taste for it, and he wants to do more than just stop a bike thief or help ladies get across the street. But the thing is that Tony Stark doesn't reply to his messages. All he's saying to him is just be your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and nothing more, because you're not ready for it yet. His suit even has some training wheels, and oh, the suit. Now I'm gonna get back to that. So you see him do these small chores and he's getting frustrated over it. He's being a teenager. But then he gets intertwined with some thugs that uses technology from Michael Keaton's character, who is Vulture, or the bad guy in this movie, and that leads him into the Vulture's plan. And the rest of the movie is just him, in the best detective movie way, try to find out what they're trying to do, where they're gonna strike next, where are their lair, and just stop them. And then I don't recall that happening in a Marvel movie since maybe Winter Soldier, where it was this spy epic. And again, refreshing. I want to see more of that. Try to take these superheroes and put them in some movie scenario that we haven't seen them yet. Thriller, catastrophe, or disaster movie, or anything, and even some detective work. The rest of the movie is just Peter Parker trying to balance his hero duties, or the hero duties he wants to prove that he can handle, and his personal life with high school and all the teenage crap that we're used to seeing in a high school movie, and actually balance that perfectly. I mean, it's enjoyable from start to finish. It's kind of like what you saw in maybe the first, but especially the second Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, who really struggles to balancing these two aspects of his life. And it leads to a lot of humor and also a lot of mistakes from Peter. And it's probably my most favorite thing about this movie, is that Peter is really green, or a noob on the hero aspect. He has been hero for probably 6 months. It takes place exactly after Civil War, and I believe they stated there that he has been a superhero for 6 months. Yeah, I think so. But he cracks jokes, and he's eager, but he constantly makes mistakes because he doesn't know how to handle the situation, doesn't know how to approach these threats. Do you need to crack a joke? Do you need to tie them up quickly? Do you need to embrace some fear? He doesn't know. So you often see him just approaching the bad guys and just don't know what to do, and he just go, "Hey guys," and then he just tries to wing it from there. And I love that. I really love that, because when you look at the other superheroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a lot of them have actually been quite decent in the superheroing stuff from the get-go. You don't see them fail at being a superhero. You might see them fail at making their costume, as Iron Man did, or the suit, I guess, or trying to get the power back, but you don't see them actually try out the superhero aspect of it. And that was a nice change of pace to see. Even Ant-Man, yes, he undergo his training, but he didn't actually do some heroing stuff in the movie. All he did was to try and pull off a heist. Now that was entertaining and, a change of pace, but again, we didn't see his journey to become a hero as much as we do here with Peter Parker. And I want to see more of that. I don't think we're gonna get that with Black Panther, since he is an established superhero. I don't even think we can call him superhero yet, because he hasn't done some superhero stuff, really. He was just, thrown into the conflicts in Civil War. But he is established and trained, and he is a leader, he's a king. He has some experience for probably a lot of fighting and wars to pull from. Well, what do we have left? We have Captain Marvel, I believe. So maybe Captain Marvel will do the same approach as Spider-Man. I don't know. Another thing I have heard a lot of gripes about, or a lot of whining about, I will say, is that people don't like that Spider-Man's suit is so high-tech. If you have seen the trailers, you can clearly see that it's more high-tech than what we probably saw in Civil War. And I can see where they're coming from, because Peter, or Spider-Man in this case, is known to get out of hard situations with his wit and his intelligence, because he is extremely smart. And now that he has a high-tech suit, it takes that down a notch. However, you need to remember that he got the suit from Tony Stark, and Tony Stark built the Iron Man suit, so he doesn't quite know how to scale things down. He can't help it, but it works in this movie. It works extremely well. They integrate it perfectly, especially because he doesn't really know how to use the suit yet. And that might seem confusing, because you might go, well, he seemed quite handy with the suit in Civil War. I mean, he tied people up with his web ring, and he swung around needlessly. So what do you mean he doesn't know how to use it? And I won't spoil it, actually, but there was more to the suit than we saw in Civil War. That being said, I do have some gripes about this movie. They're not big, but they are there. One of them is that there wasn't given that much time to develop the bad guy or the villain here. Don't get me wrong, Michael Keaton does a fantastic job at portraying the Vulture. You actually kind of get where he comes from and what his motivation are, but you don't spend that much time with him. And I know this is Peter Parker's story, but it's just becoming a tiring trope in the MCU that we spend a lot of time with the hero, but not that much time with the villain. That means we cannot set this villain up to be this third-dimensional, deep character that we want kind of to root for, and instead just get some kind of paper-thin villain. But then again, when they show him, they do that with a purpose, and you really get to get under his skin and, kind of feel how he feels. The second thing is, I wanted Spider-Man and the Vulture to fight more. And I really mean more. To get an example, just think about Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. Him and Dr. Octopus fought a lot. I think 3 times they fought. Yeah, 3 times. The bang, the train, and the end. They fought that, and you actually established a connection and a thrive for them to want to take the other person down. You don't get that here. Even the final fight is not really about them fighting each other. So that's kind of a bummer. I wanted them to show more of the fight and the struggle between them, especially so we can see more of Spider-Man doing his thing. There are a lot of side characters in here and they're not used that much. However, they are used quite well. And I think some of it has to do with that we don't have 30-something trying to be high schoolers and we had in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man franchise, or late 20s, early 30s, something to be high schoolers in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man universe. We actually have teenagers. And I know Tom Holland isn't quite actually a teenager anymore. I believe he is 20 now, but he's still in the right age range. Maybe he was a late bloomer. Well, he's portraying himself as 15 in the movie, and you kind of buy it, I must say. And they actually try to play into teenagers talking together and being together, and you get all these dramas. Actually, the thing I admired most is Flash Gordon here is not a big sports idiot like you have seen in the other 2 movies. And I know often in the comics, if not always, he is portrayed this way. But you have to remember this is an adaptation. It is not a direct representation of the comics. Because if you wanted that, read the comics. What bullies often are is they are just normal kids, normal built kids. The only thing is that they are mean. And we have probably all tried it here. And if you haven't tried it, then maybe you were the bully. Or you were lucky not being bullied. I don't know. But when you think back, yeah, there might be a year older than you if it was in elementary school. So had that year more growth and was that little bigger. But when you think about it, they weren't that big compared to you. They were just, mean. And often they had guys or a gang to back them up. And that's what made them frightening. And it's the same thing here. Flash is just a normal kid who's just a dick. And the good thing is that it doesn't bring Peter down, because often when you have a friend or some friends, it doesn't bring you down and you go home and cry about it. You just trying to shrug it off, but it irritates you because it puts you in a bad light in contrast to everyone else. But all the high school stuff is done pretty well. All the teenage interactions is done perfectly. The villain could have been better. The action sequences was actually fun to see, and I love the fact that often Spider-Man was put in a situation that he didn't know how to handle at all. He was trying different things, try to come up with how do I fix this? How can I save the day? And he would try to wing it, but not that successfully most of the times, even though he had the best intentions. And I like that. And I like the fact that Tony Stark is almost not in this movie at all. He is more than a cameo. It's more how much space he takes up in Peter's mind, because he wants to satisfy and be acknowledged by Tony Stark, which is kind of hard when Tony keeps telling him, keep helping old ladies across the road, or keep stopping bike thieves. Don't get too big too fast. Oh, here's a question. Do you need to see Uncle Ben be shot and dying once again, or seeing Peter being bitten by a radioactive spider? No! and neither does the movie. So I just can't appreciate or applaud enough that it just glosses over this thing. We all know it happened, so we don't need to be shown it once more. They do refer to it, and that's another tiny gripe, is that Peter says that Aunt May has been through a tough time lately, and we of course know they reference Uncle Ben's death, but she doesn't seem that down about it. They try to go into it later on, but it doesn't come off that convincing. So, just saying. The more we end up here, and I know that these reviews are not as long as when I hate a movie, but it's hard to talk about things that you like without spoiling it for people, whereas things that you don't like, you can often talk about without spoiling that much. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. I really like the fact how Peter he was when he was Spider-Man, energetic and, full of wonder. You even see him doing jump ropes with his webs at one time. And it's that whole scene is freaking hilarious. And also that he's cracking jokes all the time, but he's not being as snappy and kind of dickish as Andrew Garfield was. But he's clearly cracking more jokes and having more fun than Tobey Maguire was. So this kind of a perfect blend of the two. And I also think, if you ask me, he is the better Spider-Man. It is hard to judge of just 1.5 movie. But if I have to compare this with Spider-Man 1 and The Amazing Spider-Man 1, then this is the strongest one of them. Just saying. So what you end up with is an origin story, but not how he became Spider-Man. Or actually, it is how he became Spider-Man, but not how he got his powers and all the things with Uncle Ben and seeing that he needs to do good. But how he goes from a rookie hero who just wants to make the world a better place to someone who can actually handle an evil organization. Becoming the Spider-Boy or Man-Spider to becoming Spider-Man. And you actually have a great villain, even though they could have used him more. That was the fact that the balance in the conflict between Peter trying to be a normal high schooler and he wants to be Spider-Man and saving people quite well, especially because in this movie he wants to be Spider-Man more than he wants to be Peter Parker. And that doesn't end quite well for him in certain situations. Yeah, I think I'm kind of going to spoiler territory now, so I'm just gonna stop it there. But it is funny, it is well acted, it is entertaining, there's a lot of good jokes, the atmosphere is great, the villain is good for a change, and quite memorable. No sappy origin story of how he got his power and Uncle Ben. No great world threat. It's just Spider-Man and this thug who's trying to make some cash, and that's it, and it is wonderful. All I'm hoping is that this movie does so well that Sony can see that it needs to work with Marvel to make Spider-Man work. Don't make the Spider-Verse that they want to make on the sideline, because it's not gonna interconnect with MCU that well. I have a feeling. Make 3 movies with him and then you can do whatever he wants, but give us a solid trilogy, please. But yeah, it is great, it is awesome. However, there is a big however, for me personally, it doesn't quite reach its full potential. And that is just the gripes I have expressed here. So yeah, it could be an epic masterpiece, but when I look at the phrase and the rating and ask myself, is it that? Then I'm gonna have to say, no, not really. So I will say that Spider-Man Homecoming is worth watching and worth buying on Blu-ray. So, Spider-Man Homecoming, have you seen it? What do you think about it? Comment below, let me read your thoughts. And as always, until I see you in the next video, remember to stay awesome. Bye! Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can.